Welcome back. After the Champlain Towers collapsed, killing 98 people in their sleep in Surfside, the Florida legislature passed some of the strictest rules anywhere in the country to make sure buildings were being inspected, structural tests were done, and repairs would be made. The result is that tens of thousands of condo owners across the state have been hit with assessments to build up the reserves needed to make those projected repairs. Now, to be clear, these are reserve funds the condo owners should have been setting aside for years. But now, as a result, many are facing losing their homes. This week, the Florida legislature passed measures to ease some of the financial costs on condo owners. State Representative Vicki Lopez led the effort in the House.
So I think the number one key element is the ability for them to, for condo associations to get a credit line in lieu of reserves. So for so many months, we've been hearing that the structural integrity reserve study, which requires you to have obviously start reserving, was going to increase people's monthly condo fees because it's a prospective budget tool. So it would be included in the budget, which of course would mean an increase in the budget expenditures. And now they will be able to, thanks to this law, they will be able to take their structural integrity reserve study and they can get a credit line for the exact amount that they need to have. And as long as they keep that at the same amount, they will not have to reserve, which is going to be wonderful because they'll have the money there. The credit line assures the legislature that the money will be available for any repairs that need to be made or replacements of the structural elements. And yet they won't have to be paying for it before they need it. So I think that's one of the biggest ones. We also have allowed them to take out loans for the assessments. As we know in South Florida, many of the buildings are very old, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, and many have not been maintained properly over the years. So unfortunately, there's going to come a time when they have their milestone inspection, which has to be done at 30 years. And then every 10 years thereafter, there will be repairs that need to be made. So they can use the credit line or they can take a loan out, which I think will be wonderful for as an option, right? For those that potentially don't have any reserves or are thinking of not reserving as much, right? So
let me just sort of ask a question about the loan part of it.
Sure.
Is that for the association and the building as a whole, or
Yes.
is that for individual condominium owners? In other words, if I own a condo and I've lived there for 30 years and I've built up a lot of equity in my condo, and suddenly my assessment is now $20,000 that I wasn't expecting, do I take that from, is there a loan available to me, or is it for the building as a whole to be able to get the loan?
It would be the building as a whole. So, right, the condo association is the one that's saying, look, we have to incur, let's say $20 million in costs, right? So the association now has the power to go and get a loan with the majority vote of the owners, and then they can, they can say, so each unit's proportionate share, and some of them already do this. Some of them have done it by square footage, but let's just say that then they will say to everyone, here's your proportionate share. In Miami-Dade County, the good thing has been that we have an interest-free loan for those that make up to 140% area median income that's interest-free. So a lot of people, over 800 people, have already taken advantage of that interest-free loan up to $50,000. So it can go either way. Look, I mean, there are some people that will be able to have the option of getting their own personal loan because they have so much equity in their unit. And they might be able to say to the association, look, I'm willing to take my own loan out. I have better loan terms and I'll pay it, right? But for the association, it now has this option that for those that cannot pay, it can take the loan out.
I also know that the bill changed from 3-story buildings needing this report to 3 habitable floors, meaning I guess garages would not be counted. Why did that change?
So in Florida, believe it or not, we have, we always think condominiums are like 40-story buildings, but in fact, throughout Florida, we have condominium buildings that have a garage at the bottom, right? And then 2 stories. And it was really driving a huge financial, cost to those that really didn't need to be included. And there was so much confusion about 3 or more stories. And finally, I said, this doesn't make any sense. And I asked Senator Bradley to include that amendment, not only for the structural integrity reserve study, but for the milestone inspections. So now it has to be three or more habitable stories. That's going to exclude so many condominiums in Florida. So there's going to be an immediate relief for those people because, in fact, they shouldn't be included, right? It doesn't make sense. If you're really looking why we are requiring milestone inspections and structural integrity reserve studies, is because we are fearful that there would be another Surfside. And those buildings that are 3 stories, they don't need the structural integrity reserve studies. That is not part of what we know as to be engineering wise, those that would be highest risk of not only falling but of killing people. So that's a huge financial relief for those that live in those buildings that are only 3. Those would be 2 habitable stories, so they don't need to comply.
Let me just sort of take a step back for a second. The laws that were passed following the disaster at Champlain Towers. Do we get the sense? I watched some of the Senate debate, and I got the sense that there has been good that's come out of this law in a lot of ways. I mean, people have been focused on the negative aspects, the financial aspects, the pressure that it puts on condo owners and associations. But let's talk about for a second about what good has come out of that law while we're also trying to provide a relief out. Do you believe that law has
Yes.
been saving lives?
Actually, it's interesting because, Miami-Dade County and Broward County are the only counties in the state that have been recertifying buildings since 1997. So the other 65 counties have not. And here's what we've learned. In many of the counties, they've had to evacuate buildings that were not structurally sound. So the law of having to do milestone inspections at 30 years has already begun to save lives. There were several buildings where people had to evacuate immediately. They had to grab their belongings and go. You can well imagine after years and years and years of condominiums not being maintained properly and no one inspecting them, that this would in fact save lives. So yes, I mean we have to see that it's a very delicate balance that we're trying to strike, Jim. You have to ensure that Surfside never happens again and that everyone living in a condominium, me included, are safe to live in them. But we also have to understand that a lot of these requirements have caused an immediate financial strain on condo owners. So this is a way of really trying to address all of them. I think this will be landmark legislation that has really been successful in striking that very delicate balance.
There's also been a fair amount of criticism towards the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, which is supposed to oversee this. I know their staffing levels are low, their involvement has never been very strong in this area. This bill deals with that issue to some extent, doesn't it?
It does. The bill will allow now the department to actually go in and see the records, seize them. I mean, it's got a lot of enforcement provisions now that they didn't have before. And that's an important part because, if there's a complaint about a structural integrity reserve study not being done, now the department can go over and demand to see all records, all minutes. I mean, it's extensive. And I think that's going to be very helpful for condo owners because every day we find that the department doesn't have some kind of authority to regulate. So this is a third stab at making sure that they have what they need so they can respond to complaints in a timely fashion and can resolve them amicably with condo owners.
Authority is important, but staffing is also. Do they have the resources currently to be able to do the inspections or to do the oversight that they need to do?
So I happen to be the budget chair that has jurisdiction over that department. And last year we gave them an extraordinary amount of money, almost $7 million recurring, so that they could hire people. They have now, believe it or not, that bill went into effect on July 1st. It is now in April and May that they are finally hiring the last of the 64 new positions that they needed to have. So they've made a lot of progress. It takes time, but I believe that they're in a position now to be able to really respond adequately and timely.
We'll be right back after the break.